Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of FilmFellas. This is FilmFellas Big Debate. We've got Adam, we've got Nick with us, and we're going to be talking revenge movies. Guys, Adam, say hello. What have you been up to?
Hi. Well, I've had a very busy summer. I just got off reviewing the Edinburgh Fringe in August. Got a fair amount of reviews done in the double digits, reviewing comedy and theatre. And when I'm not doing that, I host a podcast called Films That Time Forgot, looking at forgotten Hollywood films from the 80s all the way through to the early 2010s.
And we're going to be talking Black Rain in October, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, we are the underrated Michael Douglas / Ridley Scott team up. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and Nick, what have you been up to, dude?
Not as much as that. I've just been writing my usual places. I wrote a feature for Slash Film about the Twilight Zone recently, like the 15 most relevant Twilight Zone episodes that are still relevant today. And I've just my piece on my essay on From Beyond the Grave has just gone live as part of Horrified Magazine's Amicus retrospective.
You know, on the Twilight Zone, interestingly, I was watching. I think I was watching Terminator 2 or something recently, and I was reading some stuff about Terminator 2, and they were saying that one of the things that heavily influenced Terminator 2 and even the Terminator was an episode of The Outer Limits, which is the kind of alternative for Twilight Zone. And so I've got to track this down. I think it's called The Man with the Glass Hand, or something like that. And I read about it, and it sounds absolutely amazing. So I'm on a mission. I need to watch more Outer Limits. I've seen a lot of Twilight Zone, including Twilight Zone the movie, which has that excellent, do you want to see something really scary kind of moment in it. But yeah. So anyway, guys, really good for you both to be here, and for you both to meet each other for the first time as well. So it's kind of like we're making friends and stuff like that. So revenge movies. Before we kind of kick off, and we'll have a look at Adam's list first of top 10 revenge movies, and then we'll have a look at yours, Nick, and then we'll mine, and then we'll try and argue it out and come up with a general consensus of at least a top 5. Maybe we might not get to agree to 10, but we might agree 5. I kind of just want to ask you both, what do you think it is about revenge movies that have this enduring appeal? I mean, along with romance, war, and horror, and I guess sci-fi, revenge movies is a really popular kind of long-standing genre. Any thoughts on it?
I think it taps into like the audience's fantasy that the characters on screen are able to do what they say can't do in their daily lives. Say if they know a loved one that has been harmed or has been attacked by other people, that or they've been wronged in some way, that the characters on screen in these films can do what they themselves can't do in real life, otherwise they get arrested. It's basically a sort of a way of living vicariously through the characters on screen, really. It's a form of, I guess, realistic fantasy.
And I guess we've all at some point been wronged in life, haven't we? Whether it be, I don't know, somebody at the lights cutting us up, or school bullies and various kind of things like that. I mean, Nick, have you got any kind of thoughts on what the enduring appeal is of revenge movies?
I think there's a sort of catharsis, isn't there, in watching people sort of get vengeance on people who've wronged them for whatever reason and stuff. But I like the ones that sort of go the extra mile and sort of show the reality of like what revenge does to you, basically. But yeah,
the whole kind of thing of eating you up and kind of actually sometimes revenge isn't probably the right way to go, and sometimes just let it be. So anyway, well, let's jump into our lists, and I'll share the screen, and we'll let's have a look at Adam's list first. So Adam, I asked you both to kind of send me a list of 10 films that you fought for as being the 10 best revenge movies in your eyes. Nick sent me 15. I think I've got 12, Nick, so I'm only just not as bad as you. And so we've got this. We've got you know, this is your list, Nick. Do you want to kind of talk us over this?
This is Adam's.
Me.
Yeah. Sorry, Adam. Adam, sorry.
Okay. Well, I went for the classic 2003 South Korean film by Park Chan-wook, Oldboy, for number one. Just because of the, I think, just because of, I mean, first of all, the performances are fantastic. You've got Choi Min-sik as the main character, Ode Soo, and he really excels at portraying this man. He's been absolutely broken. He's been broken down. He's been locked up for 15 years, from 1988 to 2003, in this sort of makeshift prison. And all the while he spends his time sort of remaking himself from sort of like this kind of chubby, sort of drunk business guy to this, you know, well-muscled sort of killing machine, in order to sort of find out who locked him up in this sort of prison and why. And what I like about it is that the revenge isn't just from the main character, it's also from the villain as well, because the plot later finds out that because the plot later develops in a way that we find out that the reason why the main character was locked up in his prison cell was as a form of revenge for what the main character did when him and the villain were both at school. And yeah, I mean, I chose it just because, one, the staging is incredible. There's the famous one-take hallway fight scene.
I mean, it's probably one of the best fight scenes in movie history. I mean, just to interrupt a little bit, I mean, Nick's actually, I'm not going to ruin Nick's list, but Nick's also put it at number one as well. But you've tied it at number one, Nick.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because I prefer Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which is like the first one in the trilogy, but I think it for similar reasons to what Adam just said. It's the sort of the revenge begets revenge begets revenge. Basically, it's like it's a never-ending cycle. And for me, at least, I think the Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance does it a bit better. And I like the performances. It's a very close thing. I love both of them. But yeah, for me, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance just has the edge. But I know.
Well, and it's interesting that in my long list, I won't share my long list yet, but I put Lady Vengeance in my long list, because I have a little bit of a guilty pleasure for Lady Vengeance. So you know, I think I'll divulge in my. It's not number one in my top 10, but Oldboy is in my. I think it's in my top 3. I agree with you. I think, you know, it's a superb revenge movie, and I think we can probably, you know, not to kind of steal the thunder on the episode already, I think we'll agree that it's probably going to be very, very high up there, is Oldboy in this. Moving on to your other films. Interestingly, you've put The Crow, Kill Bill as in there as well, and I'm going to kind of challenge you on this, because
Go ahead.
I can't stand The Crow.
Really?
I really don't like it.
Oh.
I remember seeing it when it came out of the cinema, and there was the big hoo-ha about obviously Brandon Lee sadly dying during production. I also think as well, it amuses me a lot, because in the 90s, it was almost like, okay, well, if you're a classically trained British actor, you're going to end up being a villain in a Hollywood movie, a la Alan Rickman, a la Gary Oldman. But if we can't get a classically trained British actor, we'll get a Canadian, and we'll get Michael Wincott. And if you look at Michael Wincott's filmography in the 90s, it's like literally bad guy in this, bad guy in that, bad guy in the Musketeers, bad guy in the thing. And it's like, and it's just a big joke. And I guess what it is about The Crow is, I get that it's very stylistic and the whole thing about it. I just don't find it any enjoyable. It's not a film I would ever choose to watch.
I think with me, the atmosphere is the whole kind of point of it. I think because I saw this film as like a 14-year-old, and I quite liked, I mean, I wasn't a goth by any means, but I liked Tim Burton Batman films. And this seemed to be an extension of that, with the moody gothic atmosphere, the really sort of eerie score by, I think it's Graham Revel, I think.
Right.
And the performances are just, I mean, I disagree. I mean, I thought Brandon Lee was fantastic in it. and it's just a shame that we lost him at such a young age during shooting off that film. And I really liked Michael Wincott as well. I mean, I was a big fan of him already from Robin Hood.
Yeah.
And this film just confirmed that he's one of the underrated supporting actors. And I just really liked the action scenes. I mean, okay, they weren't as good as, you know, Brandon's dad's.
Because I'm just looking at Nick's long list now, 26 films Nick sent me. And Nick hasn't put it in his long list, Nick.
Well, I'm not a huge fan either. But I appreciate it for what it is, but it doesn't really do anything for me personally.
Yeah.
Like, there's certain bits in it I really love. Like I think the bit where T-Bird gets blown up in his car is just amazing. And I think, is it David Patrick Kelly? Is that the actor?
Yeah.
He pops up in all these sort of Walter Hill films from around that era as well. He's like a really good like character actor, and it's like it's one of those films where there's little bits that I just love, and I love this. It feels like a film that I should love, but then I watch it and it feels just it's too moody sometimes.
And I think that's my problem with it, because I genuinely went into. I remember going to see it at the cinema with loads of friends at the time, and it had a killer soundtrack as well. Everything was there, and and a lot of my friends love it, and and which also brings me then on to your next film, Adam, which is Kill Bill, which again Kill Bill volume. I think the first part is better than the second part for me. I agree with you on that one. In Tarantino's filmography, it's way, way, way down the list for me.
Once again, as with The Crow, it's the atmospherics of it, and also at the same time, I think maybe this nostalgia play, because this was the very first Tarantino film I saw. Again, at the age of 14, I got this.
So there's a real youth imprint on you in this as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was just, it's the performances. Uma Thurman, I think it's actually Uma Thurman's best performance. I would argue better than Pulp Fiction.
Right.
She really nails that sort of driven quality of the bride, which you see a lot in Japanese films, similar Japanese films like Shogun Assassin, that sort of minimal dialogue, but a massive physical presence that these sort of protagonists had. I think Uma Thurman really pulls it off. Lucy Liu is fantastic as the villainess Oren, as is Vivica A. Fox. The whole, in fact, the best scenes are with Lucy Liu, not just the fight scene at the end where the snow's sort of falling down, but also where we see her origin story told.
The animation part, I actually think the animation part is genius. He's genius. I commend it. My only problem with Kill Bill is that I think it's from a period where Tarantino goes very, very self-indulgent, and it starts off with the great homage to kind of the Shaw Brothers. I think it is, the thing, and it's the same. I have the same problem with it that I have with Death Proof, which he basically is almost enslaved to that genre too much. That if you're not a fan of those type of movies, I think you might struggle with it a little bit. And I'm not a fan. I mean, listen, look, I could probably name you every Jackie Chan movie out there because I had a big period as a Jackie Chan team, but I just don't like that kind. I'm just not into them, and I just, I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Pulp Fiction I rate as number one. I think Pulp Fiction is genius, and it's probably the best film of the 90s. Reservoir Dogs, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I love The Hateful Eight. I love those films, but I think when he goes into Kill Bill and Death Proof, Tarantino loses me then. What's your thoughts on it, Nick?
I really like Kill Bill. I think it's a sort of like, I agree. It's like Uma Thurman's incredible, but also it's like, I mean, it's just at the point where he started going into his really sort of referential phase, isn't it? So it's because he's just Jackie Brown came before that. Jackie Brown is my favorite Tarantino.
Oh, actually, sorry, I forgot about that. Jackie Brown's in my top three. But I love Jackie Brown. Yeah, Jackie Brown's genius.
But I don't know. I just look at it as a sort of homage to like just revenge films in general, and like the sort of exploitation films of like the 80s and 70s and 80s, and because there's like all these sort of visual and audio cues. There's like Lady Snowblood. There's the spaghetti western that I've got on my list somewhere. Death Rides a Horse is in there as well.
Right.
Navajo. So all these sort of references, like these revenge films that are just sort of chucked in the mix, and and it is mad, and it is like really over the top, but I love it anyway.
Yeah.
No, you know, so then Adam, we come down your list,
Okay.
and we get to Get Carter.
Get Carter.
Which you know, I kind of, it's funny, you know, I wanted to kind of put in a classic, you know, revenge film. I think I put Get Carter in my long list. I think maybe it's not even. I think Nick's got it in his. Yeah, Nick's got it in his top 10 as well. It's funny because I kind of didn't want to put almost two from the kind of the same very, very similar films. There's some very, very similar films. Like I would say The Limey is very, very similar to Get Carter, and I actually prefer The Limey, but Get Carter is a British classic. I mean, you know, you're a big man, but you're out of shape, and
I mean, it's Michael Caine's best performance, in my opinion. I mean, he's never been more sort of cold and ruthless as he is as Carter. There's no charm at all. There's no cheeky chappiness or anything. He's just a stone cold killer, and it's just amazing to see him like that. And it's also interesting to see a film like this from in this time period set in Newcastle.
Absolutely.
It's not set in London. It's not set in America. It's set in, you know, a regional part of the UK.
Well, I guess in that way, it's similar to Straw Dogs in a little sense, isn't it? That it shows a part of Britain that, let's say, a large amount of the audience in America for certain wouldn't be used to kind of seeing. And I studied in Newcastle, and you know, I kind of always remembered like going to the car park in Gateshead.
Oh yeah.
So and things like where some of the scenes are shot, but. And there's a great scene where where the landlady and he says about her wearing purple underwear and things like that. And there's so many like little memorable kind of scenes in it as well. And you know, I think it's good that we've got it in there. I haven't put it in mine though. I've gone for The Limey. Nick, what's your thoughts?
I Get Carter's one of my favorite films. It's one of the first like grown up films I ever saw. Because like we talked about this before, Julian, my dad would show me unsuitable films. When it gets to read bits, he'd just do that, and that was his parenting. But like that was one of the first Michael Caine films I saw, maybe after Muppet's Christmas Carol. And yeah, I love it. I mean, apart from anything else, it's it's so brutal even today. But it's also really funny. Like the first scene between Michael Caine and Ian Hendry, who plays Eric, is like one of my favorite scenes in any film ever, because it's like it's just this sort of surface level civility between two characters who just clearly hate each other, and I just think it's brilliant. And
and then Adam, you've gone for Full Contact,
right?
Which this is the one where I've had to really rack my brains about whether because I think I'm getting confused between this and Hard Boiled. I saw a lot of Chow Yun-fat films in the early 90s, and
Full
The
Contact
Killer
comes after Hard Boiled. It
was
made in
right?
1993. Yeah, it's basically Chow Yun-fat plays a criminal who's based in Thailand along with his girlfriend and his other friend, played by Anthony Wong, who's a famous sort of a Hong Kong character actor, most famous for appearing in very gory slasher films like The Untold Story. But they're basically living in Thailand, and they pull off this robbery for this very flamboyantly gay gangster called Judge, but they get double crossed. And Chow Yun-fat is killed and left for dead.
Right.
And he sort of comes back from the dead. There's a training sequence involving him sort of learning to re-aim his gun, and he adopts a little sort of bulldog as his companion. He sort of then comes back from the dead in order to gain vengeance on this flamboyantly gay sort of crime lord. I chose it because it's again for its style. It's very over the top in the style of the heroic bloodshed movies.
Who's the director, Adam? Is it got a
The director is Ringo Lam.
Oh, right, okay.
Other Chow Yun-fat films
Yeah.
in the 80s, including City on Fire, which is the inspiration for Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
And he goes all out here. It's very stylized. There's this, the main villain has this sort of gimmick that's like something the Joker would use in The Dark Knight, where he does a sort of magic trick with a sort of like a handkerchief. And each time he pulls out a different weapon, from a knife to a fully loaded assault rifle. And there's also a moment of bullet time as well in the of a proto bullet time in the climax in a nightclub, where we see the camera follow a bullet as it heads from the gun to its target.
Okay,
it's very.
Right.
It's
I'm gonna have to check. Is this? Can I get this on Prime, Adam?
You can get it on YouTube, actually.
Right. Oh, right. Okay.
Up on YouTube. A lot of Hong Kong films are up on YouTube due to various copyright. Due to the copyright being all over the place. So you can get it on YouTube, but it's not only very kind of stylized and entertaining, but it's got Chow Yun-fat's most intense.
I mean, I love Chow Yun-fat. I mean, Chow Yun-fat to
fantastic.
me he's the Cary Grant of Eastern cinema. You know, he's
he
just
comedy,
charm.
romance,
drama. Well, what have you seen this one, Nick?
No, but I know like some of the actors, like Anthony Wong. I know from like Infernal Affairs.
Yeah.
I think he's in Hard Boiled as well. I think he's the baddie in Hard Boiled.
Right.
And I think, is it Simon Yam is the baddie?
Yeah, Simon Yam is the villain. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's in Election, the Johnny Toe film, which is
which really good. Yeah, it's funny because Nick, Adam, and I are meaning to talk about Infernal Affairs, because I absolutely adore Infernal Affairs. It's like one of my favourite films. And we're meaning that. So let's move on to your next one, number 6 in Adam's list, which is something Nick wants to take us to task on.
No.
Nick and I have had a very entertaining discussion about Alien on our chat about The Thing, and Nick's mentioned RoboCop on this one. So go on, Nick, RoboCop.
No, let Adam talk about it first.
Right. I mean, well, what can I say in favor of RoboCop? Only, I mean, it's just the ways in which Murphy is tortured at the beginning of the film, where Clarence and his men, you know, get him in the factory or the steel mill rather, and sort of methodically blow off each one of his limbs. It's just so audacious in how violent it is, and it sets the tone for the rest of the film. And you can see why, you know, the character of Murphy would be hell-bent in his revenge. The whole scene where he blows up the petrol station, just the whole. I mean.
I always love the intro where he walks into the shop.
Oh yeah.
You know, and and that whole, what I call it the Superman montage, because it's very kind of similar to, you know, the Superman movie. It's like the Superman montage of him going about the city. And then the thing that I love about, one of the things that I love about RoboCop, right, is the adverts and the satirical nature of it, which I think is brilliant. But I think it's Basil Paul Duris who's done the music. I might be wrong. I love the music.
Yeah,
the music is genius.
Composer. I mean, it follows up from his work in Conan the Barbarian. And it's interesting, for the sequel, they got Leonard Rosenman, who did the score for like Star Trek 4 and the animated Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And it's not a bad score, but it doesn't match up at all to Basil Polidoris' score. It sounds very generic in comparison.
Nick, come on. Nick sent me a message on Twitter, right? Let me just divulge this, right? So I sent Nick the list of blah blah blah, and then we just had a little. I said to Nick, "Oh, I'm really glad that I've seen that you've put this, and this here." And then Nick mentioned RoboCop about. I want to discuss. So Nick, come on, put me out of my misery. What's the thing with RoboCop?
There's nothing wrong with RoboCop. I absolutely love RoboCop.
But is it a revenge film?
I just don't consider it a revenge film.
This is what I think you were going to say.
Yeah, I don't. Look, I could be wrong. I can't remember. I don't think he's pursuing them out of revenge. In the final showdown, they're coming for him. He's not going for them.
But he's gone. He's gone there because he knows that they will find him.
Yeah. and he's
That's-
targeting them specifically.
Yeah, he's targeting. So because
and also one
I
of
guess,
them,
go on,
and
sorry,
also
Anne.
one of them, Emil, one of the villains said, "Oh, holy shit, we killed you."
Yeah, no, I remember that.
Right.
No, I know.
The thing that makes it a revenge film for me, sorry to interrupt, guys, is he walks into the computer banks, he puts the thing in the thing,
Yeah,
and he
that's
scans
it.
through all the thing, and
Yeah,
he
that's
looks
it.
at the faces of the people
That's
who
it.
killed him, remembers them,
Yeah.
and then that forms the second half of the film,
Yeah,
is which he
yeah.
goes after them,
Yeah.
and then ultimately the thing that, as he finds out that basically then there's a conspiracy, so ultimately he's been killed because of Dick Jones, so he then goes after Dick Jones. I guess that's the part of it which is the tenuous, is it revenge or is he just doing the right thing? But I guess killing the Clarence Boddicker and his men is revenge.
Yeah.
Well, no. You're completely right. That does all happen. But I just don't think he's motivated by revenge. And it's not like he's not bringing them down because of anything they've done to him. He's bringing them down because they're criminals and he's a RoboCop and that's his job. That's the way I see it. I don't see it as like he's not.
But he's also got like the human side of him that's sort
Yeah.
of that's sort of motivating him as well. It's not just like he's not entirely a robot.
I don't know. I mean, look, I'm outvoted. That's fine. I just don't see it as a.
Well, I'll be interested to see if we get any comments on this as well. So please do comment below whether you consider RoboCop a revenge movie, because I kind of got to say it's probably going to end up in the top 10 because I've put it in my top 10. If Adam's put it, I've put it in my top 10 as well. In there as well.
I'm not going to complain too much because I love it as a film. I love everything about it. I love the high noon sort of shootout at the end, but I just, for me, it's like a revenge film in like that would involve him hunting them down one by one and sort of murdering them all one by one, and he doesn't do that. They go for him. I know he identifies them and he knows who they all are, but his plan isn't to kill them. His plan is to bring them in.
But the only reason why they go after him is because Dick Jones finds out about the recording that implicates him.
Yes.
But up until that point, it is a revenge.
I don't know.
Let's move on. Right, Adam. Then after that, you've gone into Dead Man's Shoes.
Yeah, Dead Man's Shoes.
I mean, it's I think it's a great film. I remember seeing it and it really took me by surprise.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it recently. It was actually on a cinema here it was actually on a cinema here, and I saw it again about a couple of days ago. And I think what surprised me even more was just, I think, the gritty feel of it. I mean, out of all of the films on my list, this is even more kind of realistic than something like Get Carter.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is very kind of stripped down. Even the ways in which he sort of exacts his revenge, you don't actually see it on screen to begin with. You just have the two sort of main you have two of the criminals sort of bursting in saying, "Oh, look, he spray painted this on my back," and you don't actually see him sort of exacting his revenge in person until later on in the film. It's very kind of stripped down. I would argue very subtle. It doesn't glorify the main character as a hero at all. You can tell he's a very sort of broken down military veteran who just wants to get justice for his brother.
Where do you rank it in Shane Meadows' filmography?
I would say pretty high. I would say after This Is England, personally.
What's your thoughts on it, Nick?
I love it. It's probably my favourite Shane Meadows film. Yeah, for everything Adam said, I basically agree with. I love how it's sort of at the start we're so sort of conditioned to sort of like just take things at face value, and that he's a goodie, you know. And then as it goes on and he does more and more disturbing things, it's like there's the bit with the guy with Herbie, you know, the little guy
in
the hat, and he thinks he's going to let him go, and that's just horrible. And
then that whole scene in the house with the drugs in the teapot is really disturbing, isn't it?
But then it's like layers, isn't it? When it reveals what's actually happened, it's like it forces you to sort of reevaluate.
I tell you what's one of the great scenes in it, and I guess it's surprising coming from an ex-boxer, is the fantastic scene with Paddy Considine and Gary Stretch, where they just stood on the curb having the chat,
Oh yeah.
And it's that sense of menace, isn't it? And it's interesting. I'm pretty sure, and I might be wrong in this, pretty sure there's hardly any music in the film. There's maybe incidental music between scenes, but I'm pretty sure those scenes don't have any music for it. It is pure kind of performance.
Yeah, it just sort of adds to the feel, adds to the kind of naturalistic feel, and it just makes it seem so beyond what the revenge genre usually is. You know, this is sort of Charles Bronson running around a sort of fake version of New York. This is the complete polar opposite of that.
Do you
really
think? Do you think? Well, why do you think Shane Meadows has never transitioned over into Hollywood or anything like that? Do you think he just doesn't see that his career going that way, and he's more in the Mike Lee kind of mold of things?
I think his style is just so regional. It's hard to imagine it having mass international appeal, to be honest.
I mean, this is one of his few films that I think you can really classify in a genre, isn't it? It's like realism, or like, I don't know. Like my other one that I really like by him is A Room for Romeo Brass.
Yeah, Room for Romeo. But one of my favourites actually is 24/7, the Bob Hoskins one, which is his first kind of feature, which I really love, the boxing one. I'm a big fan of Shane Meadows. I've got a lot of time for him. So then, Adam, I think we've got I think it's Bruce Lee's your next one. Is it Fist of Fury?
Fist of Fury. It's a classic. The way they sort of set out the main character's motivation for revenge right at the start of the film. You know, his martial arts teachers died in mysterious circumstances, and Bruce has come back and he wants to know why. He's fantastic in this film. I think it's actually his best dramatic performance. I mean, I know the stereotype of Bruce Lee is of him as being the serious ass kicker, but in his earlier films, in a lot of his other films, he showed a lighter side as well, like The Big Boss and Way of the Dragon, and even to extent Enter the Dragon, he shows kind of lighter sides to his character, which isn't present here at all. It's very sort of down the line. And it's also the only one of his films that's really atmospheric. You know, you've got the martial arts school that's shot in shadows a lot of the time, when he's sort of exacting his revenge on the Japanese and their collaborators. Again, it's all shot, you know, in very shadowy interiors. Once or twice, actually, almost feels like a horror film when he bursts in on, I think it's the cook, and later when he attacks the interpreter, it's a night in an alleyway. He's this unstoppable force that they just can't reason with.
Would you say it's probably one of your favourite Bruce Lee films?
Well, I would say this comes second. I mean, Way of the Dragon is my first, just because of the martial arts sequences. But this comes second just because, again, I think it's his darkest film. I mean, and it's the unrelenting tone. There's only one sort of scene with his love interest that kind of breaks up the tone. But other than that, it's just sort of it's his relentless pursuit for vengeance. And I think it's also his first that doesn't let up till the end. And also, I think it's the first time we really see him, Bruce Lee, properly break out the martial arts that we know him for. Like, we see him use the nunchaku for the first time in the Japanese dojo, and later on we see him use it against a samurai sword. Whereas in the first film, The Big Boss, Bruce Lee was kind of compromised by the fact that he was having to work with another fight choreographer, and he was having to take sort of almost having to share the spotlight with, say, the supporting cast. This is the first, Fist of Fury is the first Bruce Lee film where he is very much centre stage from beginning to end.
Nick, are you a fan of this one, seeing this one, not seeing it?
I've not seen it, so I can't really comment, I'm afraid.
That's all right. Are you a fan of Bruce Lee, though? I mean, where do you stand on Bruce Lee?
I've seen I think Enter the Dragon. I think that's it, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I've got to be honest with you, I'm not a fan of the genre. I've seen Way of the Fist and Enter the Dragon and the common one. So, you know what? I'm going to check this one out, Adam. And when we chat about Black Rain in October, I'll come back to you on this one. So we'll move on to your number 9, which it's funny is this one, because I think if any film fan thinks about a revenge movie, I think there's probably 2 films that will come straight to mind. I think Oldboy is probably up there for most film geeks. But for the general kind of public, I guess Death Wish is probably the most famous revenge movie out there. I would probably argue, I think. But I have a real problem with it. I really don't like it. I just don't like Michael Winner films. I don't get them. I just, he's exploitation, but not in a kind of like a stylistic way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fascinating film for me because it's the only one of the Death Wish series where it comes close to addressing whether the main character is right in doing what he's doing. It's weird to see Charles Bronson be sick in a toilet after carrying out one of his attacks, and to see him actually try and get used to being violent by hitting like a sack of pennies against the wall. It's weird to see.
It's funny because people read a lot into it now, right? But I just don't believe Michael Winner, when he filmed this, thought any of this at all. I just think Michael Winner is a guy, from the stories and the things that I've read about him in various books and things like that. He's basically, go and get me my cigar, love, and literally, and he's like a very, apparently, directoring wise, he's kind of, very back office and things like that. And he does do very, very kind of basic pottage film. There's no real Michael Winner depth in any plots. I mean, maybe it's my problem with Michael Winner movies. I just don't like Michael Winner movies.
I mean, you can definitely level that against him from the late 70s onwards, but the stuff he does in like the early 70s, particularly with Bronson, stuff like The Stone Killer and Death Wish, it does seem to be, and also The Mechanic, just seems to be.
I was going to forgive him on The Mechanic. I think the Mechanic is the only one where I actually think I actually genuinely enjoyed. I think I saw The Mechanic around about the same time I saw Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, and I can't sometimes get the two mixed up. But I don't mind The Mechanic.
I think these three films that tried to aim for something a bit more complex, but then after that, it just seems to have just given it all up and just gone, whatever. I'm just going to film Charlie Bronson shooting a few people just from one angle and call it a day at that, and add in a rape here and there, and that's me. Death Wish is interesting because it does appear to predate that period, and that it does actually examine why the Charles Bronson character is doing what he's doing. They show him attending a Wild West show where he kind of seems to be informed by the values. We see him trying out a pistol at a shooting range. It does sort of chart his sort of his development from being a peace-loving architect who I believe was a pacifist, a conscientious objector, to being a guy who deals out destruction and vengeance.
But then by Death Wish 3, he's become Rambo.
Oh yeah.
Rambo in the urban jungle sort of thing. Nick, thoughts on Death Wish? What's your thoughts on Death Wish?
Adam was saying, what were you saying, Adam? Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but I do like how it averts the whole Bronson gets his man at the end of the day, because in the other Death Wish films, we see him arrive at his target in a fairly straightforward manner. Death Wish doesn't quite do that, and I like that it takes at least a slightly more realistic outcome of this kind of approach.
Go on, Nick. What do you think?
I mean, I'm not that familiar with it. I think I've seen it once, but I'm sort of convinced I need to go and watch it again now.
Have you seen the Eli Roth remake?
No.
With Bruce Willis.
Yeah,
trust me, don't bother. And then to wrap up Adam's list, I've got a couple of Clint Eastwoods on my list, and but I'm not so sure this is a revenge film. I might be wrong. I can't really remember the plot.
Yeah, the Lee Van Cleef character of the Colonel is basically going after the main villain. We find out in the end it's revenge. But we see kind of flashbacks throughout the film of the sort of weed-addicted villain having flashbacks to basically a rape and murder of a woman that he participated in. And then we find out towards the end of the film that the reason for the Lee Van Cleef character pursuing the villain is because of revenge. And I like how it's not revealed until the end of the film.
Yeah.
That averts a lot of the typical revenge narratives where the main motive is signposted right at the beginning. Here it takes until the end of the film for us to realize just through one line of dialogue, oh, right, there's actually been a revenge narrative.
And it's on BBC iPlayer at the minute as well, isn't it? It's,
yeah, well, I actually saw it. I mean, I've got it on DVD, but it was on BBC recently, and it just watching that film it reminds you one of what a great filmmaker Sergio Leone is, and also I just like how that subplot is sort of, it gradually is revealed to you throughout the course of the film rather than addressing it again at the beginning like most revenge movies do.
I always go on. Sorry, Nick. Go on.
Well, it's there the whole way through, isn't it? With the watches. With
the tune that plays.
There's a sort of connection between the two characters, but it takes the whole way until the final. I love that final shootout. I think it's my favorite in the Dollars trilogy. That sort of
I mean, I love the Dollars trilogy, and I was going to say my favorite story from the Dollars trilogy is still the bridge story. Do you know the bridge story? The bridge story. Where it's like, one take, we're going to blow up this bridge, and it was like, and nobody's rolling the cameras, and it's like, and it's just genius. It's just like it's one of the great kind of filmmaking stories. Okay, so that's Adam's list. So I'm gonna let's bring it on this list, and Nick, I'm gonna take it a task on this one because I'm gonna get you to pick between Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Oldboy. This is Nick's list. We got Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Oldboy 1, Kind Arts Coronet's Theatre of Blood Joint 2.
I just want to clarify.
Go on.
Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is my number one pick.
Is it? Right. Okay, good.
What I've done. I didn't realize this was going to be up on display, but the second one in each of these is just a talking point, and it's one that could easily have been in there. But I'm trying to sort of the first one is my pick. That's basically how it goes.
Right.
I'm still 11. I still haven't fulfilled the brief, but I'm still.
No, it's quite all right. We'll let you off. You're a good guy. We'll let you off. So, well, let's talk to me about your Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Oldboy, as in kind of where you stand on them, and talk us about why you rate Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance above it.
Well, I love both films. I think Oldboy may be the better film, but I just think the approach to revenge that Park Chan-wook has in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance just swings it for me in terms of like, what's the best revenge film rather than what's the best film, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I love, because it's obviously like, I can't remember the actor's name, but there's the mute guy who's like, it's basically, it's showing the whole, he's trying to pay for an operation for his sister, and he gets taken advantage of, and then he abducts the businessman's daughter, and then he gets revenge on the people who abducted him, and then the businessman gets revenge on him, and then someone else gets revenge on the businessman. It's like, it's just sort of this never-ending cycle of like, this is what you get. This is what you get. The route of revenge.
And it's almost like a reverse, almost like the complete opposite of a pay it forward, which is revenge begets revenge begets revenge sort of thing. And it's like, whereas kindness begets begets kindness. And I guess in that respect, it's kind of quite. I mean, I love the revenge show. I mean, it's up there with the Colours trilogy for me. I love the Colours trilogy as well. And I think what it is with Oldboy, maybe it's because of the school aspect of it. And I think Oldboy emotionally connected with me more, I think, as a film. And I think that's why I like it. I think that's what it rates it for me.
No, I think that's fair. I think Oldboy was one of the first. It was definitely one of the first sort of Asian films I saw, contemporary Asian films. Because it was when, I don't know if you remember, it was when it was the Tartan Asia Extreme, that label.
Oh yeah.
And I'd seen Infernal Affairs, and I think it was Oldboy, and then I just went on an utter binge and just watched as many of them as I could.
Did you go as far as seeing Itchy the Killer?
Oh, yeah. I love that film so much.
I tell you the worst one that I saw, and do you know what? To this day, I've never seen the ending. I turned it off, and I cannot watch it again. In fact, I don't think I could ever just turn it on. It's Audition. Have you seen Audition?
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
I can't watch it. Do you know what? I got as far as the cheese grater on the foot.
Oh,
the cheese slicer on the foot. I turned it off. I think it was
Yeah.
either that or I got as far as the needle in the eye, and I was like, I can't.
Oh,
I still
yeah.
don't know what happens. I don't know what
I was
happens at the end.
I mean, the best
that.
bit about audition is to go in completely blind. Don't
Yeah.
know anything
Yeah,
about it.
Yeah.
I was sort of tempted to include it in my list, but I was like, I'd have to reveal too much of what
Yeah.
happens, and I wasn't.
So
prepared to do that.
is it a revenge film?
Kind of
Right.
I mean,
Mm.
tangentially. I wouldn't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But I think that final 20 minutes is just incredible.
Do you know what, guys? You might have to offline drop me a message in Twitter or something like that. Tell me what happens at the end, because seriously, I still don't. I don't even want to go and read the Wikipedia page, because I literally, it really unsettled me. The whole thing with the bag and everything is like, you know.
That's a shocker. That's a shocker.
Yeah.
All right.
I watched it at university, and I watched it through my t-shirt. That bit, the bit towards the end, I was like, I can't. It's too much.
Do you know what it is? It's the noise she makes when she's flicking the needles.
Kiri.
Yeah. It's like, anyway, let's move on, because I'm going to have nightmares tonight. But I tell you what, interestingly, Nick, and I'd totally forgotten about this film. You've put it as your kind of, let me just pull up that list again. You put it in your second position. It's Kind Hearts and Coronets and Theatre of Blood, which I criminally, completely and utterly forgot about. The thing about Kind Hearts and Coronets is, as you can see here, I'm a big Peter Sellers fan. And it's funny because back in, the kind of when Peter Sellers was doing the whole multi-character thing, actually the person who was rivaling him at the time, surprisingly, was Alec Guinness. And Alec Guinness was literally like, one of the finest actors out there. He plays about 6 or 7 parts in this, doesn't he, in Kind Hearts and Coronets?
I can't remember exactly how many. It's more than you think, because he's like, he plays one character who doesn't have any lines. I think there's like 6 or I think there's maybe 8 speaking parts he does.
Right.
Maybe. That's just off the top of my head. Yes. I mean, the big thing about Kind Hearts and Coronets is Alec Guinness, and he's brilliant in it. But for me, Dennis Price is just incredible as the main character. He's Louis Mazzini, I think he's called.
Right.
He's like this. So the plot is his mother was part of this landed gentry family, the Gascoignes, and but she married beneath her, and so they completely cut her off. And her son and her son lived in sort of poverty for ages, and he's made it his life's goal to take out every other member of the family so he can get
it's a killing your way through the family to get to the inheritance plot, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's like it's one of the best Eden comedies, I think. It's
hang on. It's not the Lady Killers. I mean, the Lady Killers is the best Eden comedy, but it's up there.
The Lady Killers is my favorite as well.
Yeah.
But Kind Hearts and Coronets it's got this sort of jet black humor, and like it's just so good. I think there was talk of remaking it, and I think they abandoned it pretty quickly because
I think it's one of those things, when we mentioned the Lady Killers, credit for the Coen brothers for admitting that the Lady Killers is one of their favorite films, and Tom Hanks is a huge fan of it as well. And there are some films I genuinely believe it should be almost against the law to try and remake. I think the Lady Killers is one of them. It's like The Wicker Man should have been one of them. They are just films of their time that should never be tried to remake. And this is another one of them because of Alec Guinness. There's a lot of people might kind of disagree. There are. I think we've moved into a different type of acting really, because Alec Guinness came from the vaudeville style of acting, where it was very much about characters and almost extremes of characters and the comedy edge of it, where now we're more about method acting and makeup and prosthesis and things like that, where Alec Guinness does a lot with very little in this. The same way that Peter Sellers does a lot with very little in Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, I mean, yes, Alec Guinness is brilliant. But I feel like what makes the film work is Dennis Price really sort of grounds his character and he sort of plays it completely. He's got a proper like sense of irony, but he plays it completely straight, and it's like that's what makes the film work. I think is that because Peter Sellers, Alec Guinness has all the sort of doesn't like he plays all these he plays like general, an admiral, a suffragette. He plays like every sort of member of the family. So that's sort of that's where the laughs sort of come from. But Dennis Price sort of he plays it, he makes it sort of, he makes you believe in the character and the whole sort of plot. And also is it Joan Greenwood is really amazing as well. Yeah, it's
it is a fact. I mean, it's up there, isn't it? With when you talk about the great Ealing comedies, and you know, it's a shame really that in kind of modern film circles, then they're not spoken about as much as they should be. But you know, when you think about The Man with the White Suit, you know, The Lady Killers, and things like that, they're just genuinely brilliant films. And interestingly, your joint second. It's another one that I totally forgot about. Is Theatre of Blood, which is probably Vincent Price's best film.
Yes, I agree. But I put them together because I wasn't. The brief was revenge films, not revenge thrillers.
Yes.
But I wasn't sure if that was implied, so I put the two comedies together, basically.
Yeah, but I think as long as revenge is central to the plot, it doesn't matter whether it's a comedy, thriller, horror, or sci-fi, as we've said with RoboCop, which is a revenge film, and you know, so. You know, I mean, a lot of people won't know about Theatre of Blood. Do you want to kind of give us a little bit of a spin round what Theatre of Blood's about?
Theatre of Blood is about an actor called Edward Lionheart, who is one of the most hammy Shakespeare actors of his day.
Rather like Stephen Toast.
Yes. And he believes he was snubbed this prestigious award, so he throws him, that was denied him by this group of theatre critics, and he basically takes revenge on all of them, but using methods from Shakespeare plays. So there'll be like I don't want to give away the best one, but there's like there's that the Merchant of Venice is in there, Julius Caesar, Troilus and Cressida. There's all these amazing like Shakespeare scenes that are sort of reimagined in really horrific ways. And I think one of the things Vincent Price loved about it was the fact that he's never got to do Shakespeare on film, and this was his opportunity for these amazing Shakespeare speeches. And yeah, it's brilliant, and it's like all the critics are played by these brilliant British character actors as well. So you've got Arthur Lowe, Dennis Price again, Ian Hendry again, Harry Andrews, Robert Morley, all these like brilliant actors, all just sort of taken out in these really creative ways, and it's like it's just an absolute delight to watch.
Do you know what? It was only when I saw your list, I was properly kicking myself when I saw these two films. I was like, oh, God, I can't believe it. And it's like, you know, and I love that whole Ealing period. You know, I'm spending a lot of time with my dad at the minute because he's quite poorly, and we're watching. My dad loves like going back and watching all the old films. We're basically tomorrow we're doing the second Quatermass experiment and things like that, and we're going back and doing like lots of films in the 50s. And yeah, I've got a lot of love for these films. You then went and put Get Carter as your number 3, but then as your number 4, you've actually put my favorite, which is I've put as my number 1, which you know, if anybody said to me what is my number 1 revenge movie, this is hands down for me. I absolutely adore this film, and that's Point Blank.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It's do you know what the thing that I'm just going to go out there? The thing that I love about it, right, is the ending and the whole thing about is the film basically. It's similar in a way, isn't it, to Mulholland Drive, in the fact that is it a dream? You know, it basically is it this guy's dying dream, dying thought sort of thing of getting this revenge. And you know, it was famously remade, wasn't it, with Mel Gibson in Payback. And I think the you know it's formed the basis of a lot of plots. You know, the heist gone wrong, swindled, and things like that. In fact, almost it's like the plot of the remake of the Italian Job. Is this almost as well with the Mark Wahlberg Italian Job? But give us a little bit more. You know, I mean, it's probably one of Lee Marvin's best films, Nick, as well.
I think you've summed it up pretty well. Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I think it's Lee Marvin's best film. I think it's John Boorman's best film as well.
Yeah. And he's done some great movies.
Yeah, I love Deliverance is brilliant. But I feel like the use of editing is just incredible. That whole thing of the noise, the echoing noise of him walking down the corridor at the start, just sort of drives everything along. is just so good. And yeah, I mean, I don't really know what else
Yeah,
to say.
do you know what I think? I think one of the things that I think it's one of those films where they cast the perfect actor for the role.
Mhm.
You know, when I actually think this, I don't. Again, this is a film for me where I don't think any actor other than Lee Marvin could be any better in the role. He just has this unstoppable force, you know, about him, and because he's, you know, he's almost kind of has quite a lot of limitations as an actor. Actually, his limitations are actually the strength in this, in that he's just unforgiving in it.
Yeah, he's playing completely single-minded, like stoic character. He doesn't really have any emotion.
Yeah. And you know, there's some horrible things happening in it and things like that. And but yeah, I like I say, I put it as my number one. I absolutely adore it. So there's a couple of films then that you've gone for again. You've doubled up again, Nick.
Yes,
The Nightingale and Miss 45. Now, I don't know Miss 45. I haven't seen The Nightingale, but I know it's infamous for having basically a reviewer storm out of it by saying, I'm not watching any more of this, she's already been raped twice. Or something like that. It's a very, and it's funny because it's the whole Australian twisted heart. I actually think Australian movies are sometimes the darkest. You know, when I think about films like The Proposition and you know, things like that, they do very dark films very, very well.
Yes. Well, I'm not grouping these together because I think they're the same, but they do sort of touch on similar things. They're both sort of they're both rape revenge films, and they both handle the rape in a very sort of direct way. They make it very sort of just. I think yes, that was the thing. I think at Cannes The Nightingale got lots of walkouts.
Yeah,
who thought it was gratuitous or too much. And I think Jennifer Kent, who directed it, was quoted as saying something along the lines of like, "Yes, it is horrible. Rape is horrible.
Yeah.
If you're going to depict it, it shouldn't be a sort of sensationalized."
I think she was also quoted as saying that she really she was about, I'm not dressing up this for the modern world. This is what life was like for women at this time. They were raped on multiple occasions. You know, just because you find it distasteful now, I'm not dialing down what life was like for women back then.
Yeah, and it is horrific, but there's also a lot of sort of basically she's I think Aisling Franciosi is the main character in it, and she's married to a convict in an Australian colony, and I think they're about, it's been a while since I've seen it. They're about to be granted their freedom, and then at the last minute, this sort of soldier who's in charge of them is played by Sam Claflin, decides not, and he just takes it out on them. Rapes her and kills her husband and their child, and it's horrible. And then she takes her revenge on the soldiers who did that to her, basically, and she recruits this Aboriginal like tracker to help her,
right? And
the rest of the film is them sort of their journey through the forests of Australia trying to find the killers. And it starts, I mean, that's the start of the film. The horrible bit, but then from then on it sort of turns into this sort of by the end of it it's almost quite an uplifting film. You wouldn't think so, but their relationship is like really sort of touching. And I can't remember the name of the actor who plays the sort of tracker, but he's just completely desensitized to all of this violence and all the sort of horrors that he's seen because of the way he's treated on a sort of daily basis. And like the most affecting scene is when the two of them are shown just a little bit of kindness by this like elderly couple, and he just completely breaks down because he's just not used to it. It's a really sort of affecting like film, and it could not be further from The Babadook, which is her first film. But it's really worth watching. But it's a tough watch. It's a tough one.
I think it's certainly one that I check out. Like I say, you know, a lot of these kind of tough, dark Australian films, you know, like similar like Animal Kingdom, and I can't remember what the one is where it's about the bodies in the oil drums. Snowtown, I think it is.
Oh yeah,
Snowtown, which is really dark. I mean, the whole murder scene in the bath is just unbearable to watch, and you know, they seem to do very, very dark movies very well to the Australians. So, what's Miss 45 about, Nick?
Miss 45 is, I mean, again, this was just, it was just going to be a touching point, but I feel that, it's Abel Ferrara, one of his
Right. Okay.
It's similar things. It's not. I'm not saying that they're exactly the same because they've got the same subject matter, but yeah, it's. I mean, it's a fashion designer a young fashion designer who's like completely mute, and she's taken advantage of basically, and she just takes revenge. But because she's mute, she can't sort of articulate to anyone what's happened to her. And
so is it almost like a female Death Wish type thing?
Yes, maybe potentially. Although Abel Ferrara, I much prefer Abel Ferrara to Michael Winner. Apologies.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm a big fan of Abel Ferrara. I quite like Abel Ferrara's movies. But yeah. So which then brings us on to another film that I haven't seen, which is hopefully I pronounce this right, Nick. Harakiri.
Harakiri, I think. Yeah. This is another one that I rather like Audition. I don't want to give away too much. It's because most of what I enjoyed out of it was just the constant sort of revelations and sort of peeling back of story. But basically, it's this Harakiri is this old sort of, I think it's a samurai custom of ritual suicide basically.
Right.
And it's like there's this big samurai temple, and they get people coming to request to commit suicide, and the person in charge they've had lots of people coming to request it, and then after they've had a hot meal and a bath, they've basically gone, I don't want to do it anymore, and they leave. So when this other samurai comes up and says that he wants to commit harakiri, they force him to do it there and then.
Right.
And it's sort of really brutal. And then another samurai appears with the same request, and they're like, oh yeah, we know your game, sort of thing. And he says he doesn't know the previous guy, but then as the film goes on, get more and more sort of it's one of those ones that you need to watch really, because to sort of fully appreciate it. I only saw it because Takashi Miike had done a remake, and everyone was sort of talking about that, and I went and watched the original. But I think I can't remember. I think it's Masaki Kobayashi is the director.
Right.
I could be getting the first name wrong. But yeah, it is brilliant.
Well, no, it sounds good. I'll check it out. As long as it's not as freaky as Audition, I'll check it out. So then you've gone for Dead Man's Shoes, which I agree, is a great film. And then you've got something which I've also got in my top 10 as well, which is Memento.
Yes.
Go on. So it's funny, because it's one of the screenwriting books I've got. This one I've got Save the Cat, which is, and you can tell this guy Blake Snyder hates Memento. Like, there's about 5 or 6 points in it, because obviously it doesn't follow the straightforward screenwriter's beat sheet. But he clearly hates Memento. Like, he slates it a number of times within the book. And I'm with you. I mean, it's one of those things where I remember seeing it when it came out of the cinema, and it was my first introduction to Christopher Nolan. And it was one of those things where you'd just seen nothing like it before.
Yeah. And it's like, I was talking to someone about this earlier today, actually, about how, in a really weird way, it reminded me of Don't Look Now, which is like one of my favorite films. But like, without wanting to go too much spoilers for Don't Look Now is sort of about a sort of psychic who's also a skeptic who doesn't believe in the supernatural. And like, Memento is like a revenge thriller, but with someone who doesn't really understand why he's in a revenge thriller.
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't have the sort of emotional connection, but he's just got all the notes that tell him to go through with it. And yeah, that's what I enjoy about it now, as well as the structure as well.
What's your thoughts on it, Adam? Are you a fan of Memento?
Yeah, I am. I mean, the structure of it is the first thing that comes to mind, and again, how more and more is sort of revealed, and how it just sort of, and how it basically means that you have to figure out the plot as it's going on. It really puts the onus on the viewer to sort of to work out what's going on. I mean, Christopher Nolan's obviously done variations of that later on in his career, but I feel like Memento is the strongest example of that.
Mm.
And it's something that really works in the film's favor, as it also kind of measure, and also as it so sort of reflects the fractured mind of Guy Pearce. Really, it does that much better than sort of using other filmic techniques, just say, I don't know, out of going in and in focus or out of focus would. You know, it's a film which really sticks in my mind even today. The whole story with Stephen Tobolowsky's character, and Joe Pantoliano's, he's fantastic in it. It's the first example of Nolan really knowing how to use these character actors, and also Carrie-Anne Moss I was very impressed by as well.
Yeah.
I mean, she was good in The Matrix, but she's much better, I think, here playing this very kind of human character.
I really like it because I really rate Guy Pearce. You know, Guy Pearce, I always felt was saddled with this. He's a very pretty boy, you know, and things like that. And, you know, but can he act? And actually, you know, that I always remember watching Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and I thought Guy Pearce was absolutely brilliant in it. And, you know, especially Hugo Weaving as well. And it, you know, it comes into Guy Pearce's Hollywood kind of transition. I think this came out around about the same time as LA Confidential, maybe sometime around about that time. And I think, you know, Guy Pearce is mesmerizing in it. I think, you know, it's a shame actually because, you know, Nolan then after Memento and probably after Insomnia actually has gone into a path of reusing a lot of the same actors, isn't it? And I actually would probably like to see him reuse Guy Pearce again. You know, because I think Guy Pearce is a fantastic actor.
Oh yeah,
really do.
I mean, I'll probably reuse him sometime along the line. Like I know he gave Josh Hartnett a part in Oppenheimer, so maybe with his next film he could cast Guy Pearce or Carrie-Anne Moss.
Hopefully. So, and then Nick, you've I remember I watched two films back to back which came out around about the same time. I got recommended them by an editor friend I was working with, and he recommended to me, he said, watch these two films. And one was, I think it's called Hot in September or something like that, or Cold in September. I can't remember what it's called. And then he said Blue Ruin.
Oh yeah.
And both of them blew me away. I absolutely rate Blue Ruin. Blue Ruin is, I think it's probably the equivalent to an American Get Carter almost. You know, the kind of the sense of realness of it, of being in a part of America that you're not really kind of used to see, the kind of almost the lo-fi nature of it a little bit. There's a lot of kind of, let's call it earthiness to Blue Ruin.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's it's funny because I went from talking about how Memento is about someone who doesn't know they're in a revenge thriller to like this, which I think is someone who really doesn't want to be in a revenge thriller. But so he's sort of a very reluctant, like avenging angel sort of thing. He doesn't really want to do it, and it's Macon Blair is just incredible. Like he's just got the best sort of mournful face like the whole way through. It's like it's sort of very, very darkly comic. Like there's not, but it's again, it's one that I think you need to see. But it's probably the most out of all it. Maybe Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is the most sort of purest distillation of like what a revenge thriller. To me, I think is like it just sort of it's sort of very sort of economical storytelling. There's no sort of clunky exposition. It's just him sort of reluctant.
Well, I think it comes also from that stable of films where what Americans I think are very, very good at is that they will do some very, very good lo-fi independent movies that have just genuinely touching stories that are kind of like almost kind of in genre. So, you know, this is within revenge films. The other film that I kind of, it's not similar like in all, but was kind of almost lo-fi nature, which is oh god, it's the time travel one, weapons not included, or something like the one about the guy who puts the advert safety not guaranteed. So along that line of safety not guaranteed, I kind of class It Follows in that as well, which is it comes from this almost, you know, independent Hollywood, you know, independent of Hollywood filmmaking production line, but they do terrific. They're just brilliantly directed and acted films. And Blue Ruin, I remember seeing. I always remember. I think it's, you know, even though it's got quite a big actor in it, in Kevin Bacon, similar with Cop Car. You know, where it just genuinely surprises you. You're like, yeah, you know, it'll be, you know, mediocre at best, but you're watching, like, bloody hell, this is really good. And Blue Ruin for me is one of those.
Yeah, I remember it was a complete sort of gamble for us because I didn't know Jeremy Saulnier is the director who's I think this is he'd done Murder Party before this, but that was
Right.
like a sort of big budget student film. Really, this is his first film proper, and yeah, I was absolutely blown away. And then he followed it up with Green Room, which is also really good.
Oh yeah.
And then Hold the Dark, which I have trouble getting on with. It's so fatalistic. It's on Netflix. I Hold the Dark, which is kind of a western, and that's all he's done, I think, in terms of feature films. He's got another one coming out soon, but I'm fully on board with him as a director.
Yeah. And there's some directors like that you just have faith in, don't you? You just you know, you just think, all right, well, you know, even if you haven't seen any reviews of this, you'll watch this because you just have. It's interesting, you know. I haven't been a big fan of any of the Alien sequels, even though I do rate Alien 3. I know it gets a hard time, but the director of the next Alien film or TV series, whatever it's going to be, is the guy who's done a couple of really. He did. I can't remember. It's the one with the guy who's blind, basically, and it's in the house.
Don't Breathe.
Don't Breathe. It's the director of Don't Breathe. He's directing the next Alien, whatever the next Alien thing is. And do you know what? And because of that, I'll see it, because I absolutely loved Don't Breathe. I thought it was great.
Yeah, that film had a twist.
So then you picked another one which I've got in my top 10, which I actually rate. I'm going to put this up there. I think this is one of Steven Soderbergh's best films, and that's The Limey.
Yes. So yeah, I love The Limey. I would put it maybe up there. Yes, I think Steven Soderbergh deserves more respect as a filmmaker. Really, I think he's like, I love his use of like non-linear editing. I think it's sort of done in a really sort of not very not flashy way, and you never lose track of where you are in the story, really, which is kind of, it seems like quite an obvious thing, but it's not always.
Well, and I think as well his use of Terence Stamp in this, and the fact he uses a little bit of old footage of Terence Stamp, and you actually believe Terence Stamp is this character as well. Have you seen The Limey, Adam?
I haven't, although I've heard Terence Stamp is fantastic in it.
He's brilliant, and it's not a huge cast, but Guzman is brilliant in it. Peter Fonda.
Yeah, Peter Fonda's. Yeah.
Is it Barry Foster? Is it Barry Foster from?
Can't remember.
Vanishing Point, the actor from Vanishing Point. Have you seen Vanishing Point? Is the
film?
Guy in the car,
and he gets. It's one of his ones. One of his ones I've always meant to see. But
yeah,
he
gets to do some cool driving in The Limey as well. He's a baddie, but he's like, it's great.
I mean, the basic story, isn't it? It's a guy, London gangster, London villain, 60s London villain in modern day LA, going to LA because his daughter's been found dead, basically, and he suspects that all is not well. So it's a very, very kind of fish out of water revenge movie, very similar in essence. It's almost Soderbergh's Get Carter in essence as well.
Yeah, you could almost imagine Michael Caine in the Terence Stamp part, even though Stamp fully makes it his own. You can, and it's got some great moments in it as well. It's been a while since I've seen it. I need to watch it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's got a scene in it, hasn't it, where he goes into something, they beat him up and chuck him out, and then he just gets up and walks back in.
Yeah.
It's just great. And then finally, outside of your top 10, you sneaked in. Nick had to go for 11. To be fair, Nick, I've gone for 12. You put in Freaks. I don't know Freaks, so you're gonna have to bring me up on Freaks.
Can I just briefly go? I just need to get my phone. Sorry.
Of course you can. Yeah, go for it, man. Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Nick. What's Freaks about?
Oh well, I mean, Freaks is another one that I'm not entirely sure qualifies as a revenge film until quite near the end. But Freaks is a 1930s pre-code film It's set in a circus with real life freaks. It's very controversial for its day. Basically, there's a little person who is sort of seduced by this beautiful woman who's sort of meant. I think in the circus she's meant to be like the most beautiful woman in the world or something. But they have like, like how they have the strongest man in the world, all this sort of stuff. And she seduces this sort of little person who's sort of in charge, who's the money behind the circus, and she slowly starts poisoning him, and the rest of the freaks find out what she's doing, and yeah, they take their revenge, and it's horrific, but it's incredible, and it's a really strange. It's a very sort of, on paper, it should be a really exploitative film, and there are certain scenes that are like, look at this sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's a guy with no arms and no legs who there's a whole scene devoted to him just rolling a cigarette. But
this sounds like it might be right up my street, actually. Yeah.
It is brilliant, because what happens is it spends the whole film, and this is made in the 30s. It's incredible for its time. It sort of like humanized. It makes all these people like real people with real personalities. It fleshes them all out. It's very sympathetic to them. But then towards the end, when they get there, and they're all they all bond with, they're all very protective of the guy who's been poisoned, and they try to include the new wife. They've got that really famous scene where they're trying to include her in their sort of fun and games, and there's that thing where we accept her, one of us, and she goes like, "I'll never be one of you," and sort of throws wine on them. It's horrible, but they're sort of like, they're way more sympathetic than the sort of than the other characters, until the end when they take their revenge, and then the director Todd Browning sort of goes into like full horror mode, and he sort of plays with the audience's perceptions of like who these people are, and it's brilliant. It's a really good film.
I think I'm gonna have to check this one out. I think this sounds right up my street. Does this one? So what year was it made approximately?
1930 something.
Right.
I'm not very good with dates. Black
and white, basically. Yeah. Okay, I'm down with this. This sounds right up my street.
It's pre-production codes, so they managed to get away with implying some very nasty stuff towards the end. It's very good.
So let's move on to my list. So I'm gonna say I agree with you. I'm happy that we have Oldboy at number 1, because I think Oldboy is genius, and I'm quite happy that Get Carter goes in the top 5 as well. And I'm gonna shock you with a couple of things that I've put in my list. So I've put in my top 3 movies that you guys haven't mentioned: The Long Good Friday.
Oh yeah, fantastic film.
Gladiator and Munich. Now, I guess The Long Good Friday, you could argue, isn't really a revenge movie. It's a gangster movie, but effectively it is a revenge movie. Bob Hoskins' men have killed some men in Ireland. The IRA, they are enacting a revenge on taking over London from Bob Hoskins. And then Bob Hoskins is then trying to... It's tenuous, a revenge movie. It's probably a gangster movie, but I'm quite happy if you want to kick it out. But I guess the one that I really wanted to the 2 that I really wanted to highlight were Gladiator and Munich. Gladiator, would you not argue, is probably one of the most populist revenge movies of recent times?
Well, there's that whole quote, isn't there? I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Yeah.
So, it's all there, really, isn't it?
It's probably one of the biggest revenge. But I guess if you put box office down, Gladiator would probably be the most successful revenge movie out there.
I think, my thing with whether or not we classify something as a revenge film would be like, what's the motivation of the main character, or the character who's sort of driving the story forward? And in Gladiator, 100%, I would say that's a revenge film, because it's a personal mission, isn't it? He's trying to get revenge on the people who killed his family. I don't know about Long Good Friday.
No, and I think I'm quite happy to be kicked into the curb on Good Friday. And I would argue that Gladiator is probably up there with Blade Runner, one of Ridley Scott's best movies, and Thelma and Louise and Black Rain. And I actually think it's probably I think it should probably be in the top 5 revenge movies of all time. For me, I just simply because it is probably the biggest revenge movie ever, and it has so many wonderful quotable lines. I got to be honest with you guys. I'll tell you a funny story. I went to see it and I was a bit pissed when I saw it. And halfway through the movie, when he's fighting the guy with the tiger, I got a bit carried away and stood up in the middle of the cinema and shouted, "Go on, F him up!" That's how carried away I got with Gladiator, and it's very rare that movies get me like that. So I'm going to argue that Gladiator should go into the top 5. I know it's very mainstream, but I do think it should be in there. The other one that I think, and I think this is one of Spielberg's best movies, but a lot of people don't like it, and I'm not saying it's not without its problems, but I really like Munich. I think it's one of Spielberg's best movies.
Yeah, I mean, I really like him, Eric Bana in it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's quite an underrated actor anyway. I mean, he's actually very good as the Hulk, better than Edward Norton. But I think he really does a great job with his character.
Yeah, he's great, isn't he? In that he played Bronson. Is it not Bronson? Sorry, the other. What's it? Sorry, Nick.
So Chopper.
Chopper, thank you. It's the Australian Bronson, essentially, isn't it? Chopper. He's flipping brilliant as Chopper. I mean, what's your thoughts on Munich, Nick?
I'm sorry. I'm telling you, it's just a proper stickler. I really like it as well, but I'm not entirely sure how, if it would qualify as a Munich as a revenge film in my head.
But there's a scene, isn't it, where Golda Meir says that we're basically taking revenge on the people who organised the Munich. So she does explicitly say, you know, we're basically getting them back. So, you know, but I guess in a broader sense, it's a revenge film.
Yeah, I think I've just got much narrow parameters for what I would consider. I do like it. I love Kieran Hines in it as well.
Yeah.
Matthew Krasovitz.
Do you know one of the things that I really like about it as well? I love the cinematography in the fact of how it captures 70s movies, 70s thrillers like John Frankenheimer films.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where it does the long zooms and things like that. Yeah. And there's the filmmaking style of it has, and the sense of paranoia that gives you.
It's got a real feel of like 3 Days of the Condor. And
yeah.
Parallax View and stuff like that. And I appreciate that. Yeah.
So I will put that in there. And then the other film, you know, you put Adam, you put For a Few Dollars More. I went for High Plains Drifter.
Yeah, that's a very good example. No, it's
the thing about that stuck with me about High Plains Drifter was the whole thing like Point Blank, which is the painting the town red. You know, is he the spirit of the sheriff that was murdered and things like that? You know, it's part supernatural Western sort of thing, revenge supernatural Western, I guess you kind of call it. But ever since I saw it as a little kid, you know, Nick talks a lot about his dad showing him movies that he shouldn't really been watching. I watched this with my dad, and I'm not so sure I should have watched it. But I've always loved High Plains Drifter. It's just been one of those movies for me. But I also put Unforgiven in there as well. But I would say if I had to pick between the two, it would be High Plains Drifter. So
I think Unforgiven's a better film, but I think High Plains.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, but I think High Plains Drifter feels like there's more of a proper revenge film for me. Yeah. I think Unforgiven. There is obviously a revenge element to it because they hire them to take revenge. The women hire the cowboys to take revenge on the people who rape them. but yeah. And then I love Unforgiven is like one of my favorite films.
Is it? Right.
Gene Hackman and incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, High Plains Drifter is definitely more of a revenge, and I love the way it sort of, again, is the sort of he's like sort of taking revenge, his sort of spirit taking revenge of the town, or is he? But then you've got the actual released. Are they released convicts or escaped convicts? The guys who ride back into town towards the end.
Yeah.
They're taking revenge of the people as well. So it's like sort of And it's one of them's Jeffrey Lewis, who is amazing.
And then I went for Memento as well in my top 10. And then I got to confess to this because this is one of my favourite sci-fi movies. I put Wrath of Khan in there. So because it is a revenge movie,
No,
it is, like, but I just love Wrath of Khan. Do you know what? It's probably one of my favourite. If I had to name top 5 sci-fi movies, Wrath of Khan would be in there.
Yeah.
It's up there with 2001 and Empire Strikes Back and Blade Runner. I just got a real soft spot for Wrath of Khan. So but equally, I'll let you both kick out. And then I put 2 films in which I guess similar to yours, Nick. The rape revenge film. I put I Spit on Your Grave in there as well. And the only reason why I put it in is because back when I was a little kid, I was about 6. I used to get looked after by this woman, and she had these. I went to school with her son, and she had these older daughters. And I remember eating this jam donut, right, and walking into this living room, and watching this scene where this woman gets in this bath naked and pulls out a bread knife, and all of a sudden all the water turns red. I later learned that this is I Spit on Your Grave. I've got to confess, I've never seen the film, right? Yes. I've never seen it and I can't eat jam donuts to this day without remembering this scene. And simply because of that childhood imprint on my thing with jam donuts and this bath scene where somebody's cock is chopped off, I've had to put it in there. But the other film I put in there, which I guess Nick, you could argue again, is it a revenge movie? Is Leon?
I think it is. I think that one counts.
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah. As the judge on it, I would say yes. That's.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think that's got enough there because that's Matilda. Yeah, Matilda's hunting down the men who killed their families. That's
yeah. And because of that, I would argue that Leon has to go in the top 5 because I've got to be honest with you, I think Leon is one of the greatest films of the 90s.
It is very good.
Yeah, I just absolutely adore it. Right, so I'm going to put you both on the spot.
Can I say sorry?
Yes, go on.
Because I thought you were going to include Once Upon a Time in the West in your top 10 because I thought that to me, out of all the sort of spaghetti westerns we talked about and westerns we talked about, that's to me is the one that fits the best.
Yeah, I think it's in my long list. Yeah, there you go. Put it in my long list along with High Plains Drifter and things like that. Yeah, I did put it in there. I also had Irreversible and The Revenant and John Wick and Irreversible. I think it's one of the great French movies out there. And I guess I just preferred High Plains Drifter.
But I mean, I think just watching them today, I feel like that's the one that's got the most sort of modern sort of feel. It feels the most modern in the way it sort of depicts the sort of revenge thing of how that they hold on to that right until the end, like for a few dollars more. But I think the whole motif of the harmonica and what that means. Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to chuck it in before we.
Well, why don't we keep that in mind then, Nick? And why don't I ask you and Adam? I'll be the judge now and get it out. So, are we agreed then that we're going to put Oldboy as our number 1?
Yes.
Nick, but Nick wants.
No.
I'll go with it.
I would say Oldboy. Okay, right. In at number 2, what would you like to see in at number 2, Adam? Out of all the films, now that we've discussed all these films, what would you? I'd be quite happy if we went for Get Carter or something like that.
Yeah. I'd be absolutely fine with Get Carter. Yeah.
I'll put in that Get Carter goes in above the line because I don't think, similar to what Nick and I were discussing about The Thing in Alien, I don't think you'd have the Limey if you didn't have Get Carter.
Yeah.
We're doing top 5, are we?
Yeah. So because I think we'd be here all night. I don't think I've got enough hard drive space to take. So number 1 is Oldboy. Number 2 is Get Carter. Number 3, guys, what do you think? I'm going to vote for Gladiator because I just think Gladiator's got to be in there because it is probably the biggest and most successful revenge movie of all time.
I'd maybe suggest Point Blank first.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
I'm quite happy with Point Blank. I'm just being devil's advocate.
I would back Nick up there and say
Yeah.
Point Blank.
Okay, yeah. So number 1 is Oldboy. Number 2 is Get Car. Number 3 is Point Blank. I'm happy with that because I had Point Blank as my number 1. I'm just playing devil's advocate. Right. Number 4 and number 5, one of them has to be Gladiator. Come on, guys, it has to be. We can't not have it.
What about number 5 Gladiator, number 4 Dead Man's Shoes?
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I'm with that. I think that's fair. Okay, so for those of you who've lasted this long, if you just skip to this, we've got Oldboy's number 1. Get Car's number 2. Point Blank is number 3. Dead Man's Shoes is number 4. And Gladiator is number 5. And we'll probably, between us after this, I'll post the actual top 10 in the comments when I've agreed with them, with Nick and Adam in the list. And so, listen, guys, we've probably been on about an hour and a half now, but I just want to thank you both for joining me on this. And Adam, you'll have to get Nick on Films That Time Forgot.
It's basically what it is it's in the style of film podcasts like How Did This Get Made, Blank Check with Griffin and David, and No Such Thing as a Bad Movie, where we go through a Hollywood blockbuster from the 80s and 90s through to the early 2010s that hasn't really been that well remembered, and I go through it scene by scene, and you've been adding your comments and what you think about it. And then
so Adam and I did Fallen, which
the Denzel Washington.
Yeah, Denzel Washington. So yeah, definitely, and Adam and I are going to be doing
Black Rain
at some point. And Nick and you and I need to get together because you and I need to do Walter Hill at some point as well.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So listen, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. I just want to say thank you guys for joining me on this. I'll stick all your social links and everything in the comments below. Feel free to say goodbye, guys.
Okay, bye.
And I'm going to stop recording now. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot, and catch you next time.